Years after a famous person's biggest problems, their kids are finally telling their side of the story. What everyone guessed is now coming out. This is about someone who lived in front of cameras but kept many secrets hidden. This story starts with a kid who grew up really poor. He learned early that life was hard and food wasn't always there. That tough childhood changed how he acted his whole life. Even when he became rich and famous later, he never forgot what it felt like to have nothing. He became super controlling because he never wanted to feel powerless again. People saw him smile on TV, but they didn't know about the scared kid inside, who was afraid of losing everything. He worked really hard to become successful. He didn't wait for good things to happen. He made them happen. He built his career step by step, never letting anyone else take control. The people around him noticed something strange. He was talented and could create amazing work. But he also got angry when others tried to take credit. He never forgot when someone hurt him, and he never forgave them either. As he got more famous, he became quieter and more careful. He didn't trust the nice things people said about him. Fame gave him attention, but it didn't make him feel safe. So he built his own safety and kept it close. His first big relationship was with a woman named Bonnie Campbell. She came into his life when he needed someone steady. They got married and had a son named Buddy. Alan. She tried to hold their family together while he chased his big dreams. But their marriage fell apart. He wanted to be great and famous. She wanted a quieter, gentler life. They got divorced in the early 1950s. Later, something crazy happened. Bonnie married another famous musician named Merle Haggard. This same Merle would become his rival, his enemy, and later his friend. That complicated triangle started way back. Then, after the divorce, he threw himself into music, like it was the only thing that mattered. He worked every stage, every radio show, every chance he got. He created something special called the Bakersfield Sound. He didn't just find it, he built it piece by piece. Fame didn't come fast, but when it came, it stayed. He went from small stages to big national shows. He even got on television. He formed a band with really talented musicians who understood that he expected perfection all the time. The most important person in his band was Don Rich. Don wasn't just a bandmate. He was like the heart of the whole group. Don was the only person who could tell him no without getting in trouble. Don brought happiness that he didn't have naturally. Together, they made music that defined a whole era. They built something bigger than egos and rivalries. He needed Don more than he ever said out loud. Some people even said Don was the only person who could challenge him without facing consequences. As he got more famous, many women came in and out of his life. He got married multiple times and had 3 sons. Each relationship had love at first, but then distance and then arguments. His friends noticed a pattern. He would love someone strongly at the beginning. Then he would pull away. Then he would try to take control when he felt threatened. This pattern showed up in every relationship. Some people said he was charming. Others said he was difficult. Most said he was way more complicated than the smiling guy people saw on TV. Television made him a household name. He brought country music into living rooms all across America. He controlled every little detail of his shows. The jokes, the way things looked. Everything had to be perfect. To the audience watching at home, everything looked easy and smooth. But to the people working with him, it looked like a man who couldn't let anything happen without his approval. He had to control every single thing in the background. His rivalry with Merle Haggard kept growing. It started with music, spread through the industry, and got worse when Bonnie became Merle's wife. Their town wasn't big enough for 2 men with that much pride. Newspapers said it was a clash of music styles. People who knew them said it was a clash of personalities. The deeper truth was that they actually needed each other. They were mirrors of each other, both trying to figure out where they belonged in a changing world. By the middle of his fame, he was at the very top of country music. He had money, power, control over his art, and a sound nobody else could copy. What he didn't have was the ability to predict the moment that would break everything he'd built. It wouldn't come from a scandal. It wouldn't come from a rival. It would come from losing the one person who kept his world balanced. That moment was coming faster than he knew. And when it arrived, nothing would ever be the same. He walked through life thinking that control could fix everything. But behind his public image was a pattern that followed him everywhere. The studios needed him. But the growing expectations created stress nobody around him could see until it slipped. Every new relationship came with pressure that never showed up in photographs. Each time he tried to have privacy, people watched him even more closely. The media fed on any weakness they could find. He knew how to deal with chaos. But the real problem started when his fame began controlling every personal choice and every emotional conversation he tried to have. The industry had made him their most dependable star. But the higher he climbed, the more his silence created questions about what he was going through. His relationships became the clearest sign that everything underneath was unstable. People who got close to him noticed tension he never talked about. He put up walls whenever closeness required real honesty instead of distance. The spotlight entered every home he tried to build. Every moment he tried to protect. The attention didn't just follow him, it destroyed any personal life he tried to have. Each relationship started breaking under the pressure of what the public expected. When he started his next serious relationship, he hoped stability would finally beat the noise. But it was more complicated than that. They both carried their own histories, their own walls, their own fights. Their connection fascinated people. But the public didn't understand how two totally different emotional people crashed together in a home already strained by outside interference. They both tried to hold on, thinking they could outrun the pressure. But misunderstandings piled up. Every interview created new interpretations they didn't intend. Every time one appeared alone, rumors started before they could correct them. Nothing stayed personal. Their attempts to stay together became a public experiment that the world watched, hungry for scandal. The emotional fights got heavier as his career shot up, while hers got more complicated. The imbalance made attention worse. Their communication broke apart. Their identities shifted. Their public images got harder. The emotional distance grew until it started shaping what happened next. The world thought they represented perfect fame, but inside their home, each fight became bigger than what started it. Arguments weren't about the present moment anymore. They were about heavy stuff from their pasts they'd never dealt with. Trust weakened, stress mounted. Misunderstandings replaced clarity. Silence replaced honesty. The foundation that once felt solid now shook under the weight of two people trying to survive public life, while carrying emotional baggage they'd never unpacked. The breakup didn't just end a relationship. It changed his career, his identity, and his public story. The world tried to figure out who to blame, but he refused to join the circus that followed. Instead, he turned inward, thinking that getting away from the noise might bring back the balance he'd lost. But the aftermath cost more than he expected. The emotional damage stayed. The legal fights went on forever. The custody arrangements made the tension worse. The reputation he'd built over decades became vulnerable to interpretations he couldn't control. Now, as he entered the next part of his life, he tried to rebuild without dealing with the emotional instability that had already started changing his behavior. He thought discipline could replace healing. He thought silence could protect what was left. But the unresolved problems followed him into his next relationship, one built on passion, artistic intensity, and emotional fire that created Both connection and conflict. Their chemistry caught fire quickly, but the volatility appeared just as fast. The public watched the relationship unfold like a show, not knowing how quickly admiration could turn into tension. Inside a home where both battled private wounds, they inspired each other creatively, but their personal lives crashed in ways neither expected. Their arguments got worse. Their misunderstandings got sharper. Their differences piled up until the emotional cracks started shaping a story that would soon explode into one of the most defining controversies of his entire life. This period became the turning point. The world thought he'd regained control. In reality, instability had reached a point where the smallest fight could trigger events impossible to contain. The pressure of balancing fame, fatherhood, partnership, and personal battles built tension that neither side could fix. The home that once felt like a safe place became unpredictable. He didn't see it coming. He thought he could manage the tension until the moment he couldn't anymore. What happened next became the catalyst for the most damaging chapter of his life, one that shifted public opinion, started legal battles, and changed his future in ways he could never reverse. The shift didn't begin with scandal, but with a pattern of strain that built silently until one moment exposed everything he'd tried to control. The pressures inside the home had been building for months by the time the family got on the plane for the flight that would change his life. The atmosphere between them had already reached a point where even the smallest trigger could cause a reaction neither could contain. The flight was supposed to be routine, but the emotional weight they carried turned the cabin into a pressure chamber where every unresolved issue came up at once. The argument started quietly. A disagreement about parenting turned into a confrontation made worse by exhaustion, stress, and the fragile balance that had defined their relationship in its final stages. Witnesses later described tension, raised voices, and an environment charged with frustration that had built up long before that day. What had once been private now happened in a confined space with nowhere to retreat, nowhere to calm down before it crossed into something that couldn't be taken back. The incident became the breaking point, not because of what happened, but because of how quickly the world grabbed it. The moment the plane landed, the story escaped his control.